Hey, what's up? Zach here, and today I've got the all-new adidas Trae 3. These are quite a departure from the ones and the twos. They got their own set of pros and cons, just a ton of interesting things, though, to look at inside of them. A lot of things that you're going to love or you're going to hate, probably, so let's get right into them. Now, starting off with my biggest love-hate or Jekyll and Hyde is the uppers, the Trae 3. Now, what I like about the Trae Young line is you can tell it is a genuine signature shoe. It's genuinely things that he wants in them because, like, the uppers are the ones and the twos. You know, there's not a lot of people that would have come up with that, and there's not a lot of people's games that those fit very well, that they fit someone like Trae Young who wants all those degrees of motion, but has that incredible balance, that incredible leg strength, and kind of that hopping, nimble, lightweight footwork that he has to make that shoe really come alive. Whereas a lot of other people, myself included, I think a lot of other probably advanced players just can't really extract a lot from that type of shoe. And I think that's maybe why those got such mixed reviews. Now in the threes, they've gone back to a traditional three-piece tongue. I mean, it is gusseted, which is nice, but it is, you know, just more of a traditional setup. Now, that tongue is still very thin, just like in the ones and the twos. When you move up the lace line, that lace line goes up very high into that mid-top. So you're lacing around more the proximal portion of your ankle, and because that tongue is so thin, it really can just cinch around your ankle, so it can get a little bit uncomfortable. Now the rest of the upper is just a pretty standard adidas just mesh knit upper, you know, on the top layer. However, when you peel it open, it almost looks like layers of an onion. There are so many layers underneath of the top layer of the upper before it gets to your foot. These are really, really substantial uppers, and I think that's why, for me, I had such a hard time breaking them in. I mean, it took several times out, and them even just walking around, just kicking around in to get these uppers broken in. Now, if you look at them on the breathability test, they did heat up 116.7 degrees, cooled down another 45.3. And even though the tongue in them is serrated, it has these giant holes in them for airflow, because the rest of the uppers is so substantial, there is just a lot of material to trap heat. And if you look at the back of the heel, which is, I think, the best part of the uppers, you get this ridiculous padding around Kager's triangle, around both sides of your Achilles tendon, right in front of it. It's got almost triple thickness padding in there, and it really does suck your ankle into the shoe. The only thing is you have to wait for the rest of the uppers to break in for yourself to actually seat into the shoe better. So that is more of a fit for maybe like 7 days after you've gotten them. That's when that's really going to start to feel better. I think also once the midsole foam, once you start kind of seating into that a little bit more, you do get a little bit better fit. So the uppers to me are protective. It's just they do take a little bit of an extended break in. And on the upper durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper. Interestingly, the burr does rip through the drag guard on these. It does not get through the mesh layer. But once we get to the outsole section, you'll see these aren't meant for outdoor courts anyway. So I think as long as you're keeping it on, you know, hardwood rubberized carpet courts, they still should probably be okay. And getting into the midsole teardown, this was one of the more perplexing ones I've done, because on the website it says that there is boost and light strike in here. However, some of the industry news that I've seen and just people I've talked to have said, you know, Adidas has come up with a completely new foam for this shoe, and that's really what it looks like is underneath of here. To me, now Adidas gets really close to the vest on a lot of their products. If you've seen in the running section of Adidas, they've come out with like 3 light strike products, all made with different materials, and light strike is basically like the way they make it, right? It's bottom light but more resilient, and they can make that with EVA, with TPE, EE, whatever. Whereas in this case, it feels like a combination of bounce foam and light strike foam. It is incredibly bottom light, but it is also a little bit more, I don't know, I should say like substantial, or feels more like a bounce house underneath your foot, kind of like bounce foam when it's new does. If you look at it under the microscope, those pores are not very dense. They are a little bit more wide open. So I do think that this might be a little bit of like a combination or something like a light strike EVA. If you look at the bounce height test on them though, which was really interesting, it got 29.5 centimeters in the heel and then 30 centimeters here in the forefoot. And that's not bad, but that is right around light strike and bounce territory. So it stands to reason that it's some combination of those two. I might be wrong, but that's just kind of what I'm seeing from, you know, just the microscope, the ball bearing test, and just kind of the squeeze test. But even more interesting than the makeup of the midsole foam is all the shapes you get here. I mean, number one, this is not a symmetric foam. Look, I mean, it's got undulations here in the heel and the forefoot. This is not just a straight slab of foam, which is like the Trae 2, which was also my favorite part of the Trae 2, because I thought it gave you a little bit more of an anatomical feel on the bottom of the foot. It more mimicked, you know, the ball of your foot and just all the shapes and undulations of your foot and your heel bone. whatever. Now, the other cool thing is, you look at the bottom of it, you can see this shank goes more from east to west than north to south. It does have a little bit of a flange that goes in toward the medial side or in towards your big toe joint, maybe just a little bit more pivoting power, and just to kind of grab that distal arch. But this shank is, I think, is much more meant to keep the lateral side of the shoe more stable, just because there is so much foam on this shoe. And just to give it a little more stress shielding, they put it plantar, and it is super thick. I mean, the foam in this is super thick too, but the shank is just ridiculously thick here in the mid part of the shoe. So it is not just a little bit of like a mesh cage here. There is actually some thickness to that plastic. The one thing is because it is bottom loaded, and because it doesn't do as much north to south in terms of like creating an arch in the shoe, that does have some implications for fit, which we'll talk about. And getting into the other super interesting part of the Trae 3 is its outsole tread. Once again, like I said, the midsole, and like the Trae 2, it is an undulating pattern, which means it is uneven in terms of depth. And that's based on what adidas says is Trae Young's just movement data, his quote-unquote biometric data. Now, the thing I love about these undulating type treads and things, they say it's, biometric data. It more just mimics the shape of the bottom of the foot and where that foot will contact the ground. So if you're doing something maybe in a crush box, or you're doing something barefoot or putting leads on the foot and just seeing kind of where the pressure comes in, like a pressure sensor, that's what you'll find. You'll find this kind of shape. What's interesting is in the ball of the foot, that's where they put the harder rubber. The durometer of this rubber comes in at 19 versus 13.5 on the rest of this, more translucent rubber. And these little serrations here in the ball of the foot, I mean, those are just gonna wear down really quick if the rubber is not super hard. The rest of it is just more of like a monster truck pattern, more like Delta pattern. Unlike most Adidas shoes where, you can wear them indoors, outdoors, it really doesn't matter. It's a more chunky tread. You can tell, once again, this is made for a really well-maintained indoor hardwood court, which if you're playing on them, it's gonna be great. What I found on this is it doesn't seem like it's going to grab traction all that well when you walk in them. However, once you start getting up on the balls of your foot, start bouncing up and down and kind of making more of those jab steps, side steps, you can tell there's rubber where you need it. It's almost like a trust fall with these shoes. You just kind of have to trust it, but the grip is there. I found the grip to be actually pretty darn good, especially after maybe 2 or 3 minutes of warming. And it is a more niche pattern, but like I said, it does grab great. You just have to make sure you tell your brain that this will grab and just to trust it, because it is a very trustworthy type grip. And we look at the speed ratio of the Trae 3s, only comes in at a 1.82, which to me is pretty representative of the shoe. It is, like I said, it feels bottom light, but there is just so much foam around it. It is just so bulky that the shoe just is a little bit heavier. Just because the foam feels a little bit bottom light doesn't mean that there isn't a ton of it on there. So definitely not a shoe for coast to coast speed, but as we'll see in the playability section, some nimble, agile, quick cornering type speed that they do have. So make sure you stick around and talk about that. Now, if you look at the outsole durability test, 10 seconds, highest grit sandpaper, it's on this shoe. Yeah, unlike a lot of Adidas shoes, the burr does get about 1 millimeter of damage on like 1.5 millimeters, 2 millimeters of tread depth in some areas. I mean, mostly 1 millimeter. So I would just be keeping these on indoor hardwood rubberized or carpet. I do think these are a decent carpet pickup because of how serrated the treads are. I think they will grab into those little fibers, those little looped fibers of the carpet court. So I think as long as you're keeping on any indoor surface, you're fine. On an outdoor court though, this is just going to rip through like crazy. The ball of the foot might last a little bit longer because the durometer is higher, but yeah, so just keep them on indoors and you should be okay. And when talking about the fit of the Trae 3s, it's not necessarily a conversation on widths, it's more heights of your arch. Narrow medium foot, I think just go true to size. Even a 2E can go true to size and break this in. It will take a little bit of a break in, but you can just go true to size. In terms of arch heights though, if you're somebody with more of a hyper mobile flat foot, like a painful flat foot that needs an orthotic, then you better be putting an orthotic in these, because they do have quite a bit of a pronatory moment, which means just at baseline, they kind of want to be a little more everted. Remember that shank is more lateral, so the midsole foam on the medial side or on the inside of your foot can just kind of push in. Now that's great for stability, but if you're someone that does strain a little bit, I just did notice that even my super high arched foot was able just to kind of pronate and more just evert down pretty easily. In terms of the snake bites in your foot, in the heel, this foam is very, very forgiving. So I think with the orthotic in there, I think it's fine. Ball of foot pain with an orthotic, I think is okay once you've broken them in. Like I said, the break-in time on this is just a little bit much. And like I said, if you're someone that does have problems with shoelaces on the anterior or the front of your ankle, some like more high arch in the back, this just might be a mismatch for you. They are incredibly stable shoes, and like I said, because of the tread profile on them, they grab in all the right areas. So if you're looking for something with more like functional ankle stability in a shoe, and you're someone that wants like, you know, a lot of like easy movement, bouncing type movement, this is a nice pickup. Like I said, it is just such a niche and more esoteric shoe out there that they fit just all these little pockets of players, not necessarily just groups of players. So you just kind of have to make sure that you kind of thread the needle with these. And speaking of threading the needle through that fit profile, that really does transition well into the playability section. Remember, like I said in this video, these are meant for Trae Young to play in. They are meant for somebody with a very easy, kind of lightweight, bouncing, kind of feathery type footwork than for someone that likes to jab step from step to step, not necessarily bound down the court from east to west. They're not the fastest shoes out there, but they are very nimble and they are very just kind of like, they almost feel like, you know, like you see on like, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, they're just kind of bouncing in their spacesuits along the surface of that one planet. That's kind of what these feel like, just very easy bouncing steps. And so if you're someone like Trae who can make really easy step backs or just kind of makes those really, once you get into like a crowded area, makes those very quick 1, 2, 3 cuts, just where his feet almost never touch the ground. That's what these were really meant for. They're meant to grab traction on little areas of the shoe, and those little areas of the shoe, they'll give you kind of the maximum bounce back, kind of like why that shank is in the position that it's in. I think that's also why that midsole is formulated like it is. When you're putting a lot of pressure on one area of it, it does give a lot back versus like on something like a ball bearing where it doesn't really show just how explosive this shoe can be. One thing I noticed is for the midsole and how big the foam is and everything, the uppers, just like in the Trae 2 and the Trae 1, they just don't kind of match up with the outsole, and I think that's because they wanted to do a 3-piece tongue, but they also wanted to make it as shifty as the 1s and the 2s for Trae, and I think that's the compromise that was given there. So I think you really have to try them first and see, or if, like I said, you're someone that likes the Trae 1 and the Trae 2, and you want that 3-piece tongue, once you break them in, you'll probably really like these. It's just, like I said, got to be the right player, and I think, like I said, you'll see some people in them in the gym, and those people are going to absolutely love them. It's just some other people might have some problems with them. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, kind of what you think. Are you trying to go to these, especially after the 1s and the 2s and kind of their design versus the 3s? So let me know in the comments down below. And if you want to see another outsized shoe that gives outsized performance, the more energy you put into it, the Nike GT Jump 2 going to the knife, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam, especially new proprietary foams. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.